I speak to you in the name of God, the one who heals, the one who restores, the one who gives life. Amen. Please be seated. Before I get to the actual homily or sermon part of the homily sermon, I wanted to tell you a brief story. It will become clear, I hope, why. On my summer vacation, we had the chance not only to visit with family and friends, but I was able to see a couple of people who have been significant influences and mentors in my life. I got to see a priest that I grew up with at the cathedral in Victoria, and I got to see a close friend and colleague that I had worked with at the cathedral in Victoria. I also got to see a bishop that I worked with and served under while I was out west. We also went to the Sorrento Center, which is an Anglican retreat and conference center, which is in the interior of BC. And I was reminded, after seeing all of these other significant people and remembering significant parts of my formation and faith and life, I was reminded of another person. There was a priest who helped found the Sorrento Center, and he went on to become a bishop. His name is James Cruikshank. He was Bishop Jim. Bishop Cruikshank was at VST, sort of semi-retired, in my time at the school, and it was because of having met him and the influence of a friend and colleague that I spent a summer in a little town in the interior called Barkerville, which is a gold rush town historically, but is now a park. It's a historical recreation of something that once was. But there's two original buildings in Barkerville. One is the Anglican Church, and the other, interestingly, is the Masonic Temple. So I went as a theology student, and I got to take services, and I got to pretend to be a priest for the summer, part play acting, but also leading morning prayer and evening prayer every day. Now, where Barkerville is in the province used to be where Bishop Jim's diocese was. It was formerly the Diocese of the Cariboo. The Diocese of the Cariboo is no more. And this also came to mind because the last time I was up here preaching just before I left on vacation, I was talking about reconciliation. I was talking about the church's role in reconciliation, and I was remembering another bishop, Archbishop Michael Piers. And another significant personality, both in the Canadian Anglican Church and somebody with very wide influence, and somebody who is a close friend of the bishop that I did get to see, also Bishop James, but Bishop James Cowan. And we spoke when I saw Bishop James about Michael, and again, reminded of his influence, his leadership, and thinking of Bishop Jim Cruikshank. The reason that the Diocese of the Cariboo is no more is because early in the days when the church was discerning about how to move forward with reconciliation with our First Nations brothers and sisters, there was a specific litigation brought against the Diocese of Cariboo. And Bishop Jim went all around his diocese, and he spoke, and he preached, and he listened, and he visited with people in the church and in their homes. At first, the diocese was pretty much more or less dead set against the whole process of the litigation and wanting to resist it. And by the time Bishop Jim was done touring the diocese and speaking to people, the church in the Diocese of Cariboo was ready to sell all of their buildings so that they could fully enter into the process of reconciliation. because they came to understand that the church, the place where God dwells, God's house, is not buildings made of stone, but it is in the hearts and minds of God's people. So when we were in Sorrento, thinking of Bishop Jim, and I got to see Bishop Jim's son very briefly, which was also wonderful, and just reminded of all of this. And then looking at the readings today, and again, reflecting on all that, I remembered one of the pieces of advice that Bishop Jim gave to me before I went and spent that summer in Barkerville. And also because I had the chance to see him in action at the chapel at VST, his words of wisdom combined with his preaching style was quite significant, because he had a way of speaking and preaching that was very powerful. And me telling this story and my own preaching is not going to be anything like his preaching, because he would preach for maybe a couple of minutes, literally like 2 to 3 minutes. And it was what I can only describe as like a punch to the gut. It was so powerful and so short. It left you breathless and thinking about it for the rest of the day, if not the rest of the week. He would say things that were straight from the Spirit, deeply impacting, deeply spiritual. He was a master of using few words to say much. So, I have not done that at all, but I did want to tell you the story because I thought it was important. So, thinking about Bishop Jim, the other significant and important mentors and people in my life, and thinking about Bishop Michael, Archbishop Michael Piers, and reconciliation, thinking about the readings for this week, in my best attempt to offer something in the style of Bishop Jim, I offer you this. God's home is right here, in your hearts and minds. The reasons why these bricks and mortars mean anything is because of you and because of those who have come before you. Paul said in so many words that God seeks to unify, to heal, and to reconcile. Not just those who think of themselves as chosen, but those who are chosen by God. Those who are perhaps seen as being close, and those who are perhaps seen as being far off. Because God's home is in your heart and in your mind. The house God promised to make for David is right here. You are God's house. There is nothing in this world that can separate you from the love of God, that seeks you out and seeks to reconcile and restore and to heal. We are all in need of healing, and we are here. And so this is God's house. But out there is also God's house. God working in you seeks to make that healing and reconciliation and restoration real and true. And God seeks to bring that healing and reconciliation and love through you to the rest of the world. You are worthy, and you are loved by God, and you are called by God to realize that you are God's home, that you are God's house, that you are God's heart. Always remember that God lives in you, constantly healing, reconciling, and restoring. You are worthy, you are called, and you are loved. Amen.